The envelope sat on my desk at work, hand-delivered by a process server at precisely 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Inside were photographs, 23 of them, to be exact. My husband Marcus, with his assistant Elena, took over the course of 6 months. Hotel lobbies, restaurant patios, her apartment building at midnight. The private investigator's report was thorough. Dates, times, locations. Credit card statements showing purchases I'd never seen, jewelry I'd never received, weekend conferences that were actually beach getaways. My hands didn't shake as I reviewed each page. My breathing stayed even. I'd suspected for 8 months before hiring the investigator, and I'd spent those months preparing for exactly this moment. My name is Catherine Winters. I'm 42 years old, and until this moment, I'd been married to Marcus Winters for 17 years. We'd built what everyone called the perfect life together. The colonial house in Westchester. 2 children, Emma and Lucas, now 15 and 13. Marcus's thriving commercial real estate firm. My career as a senior financial analyst at Belmont Capital. What nobody knew was that I'd seen this coming long before the photographs confirmed it. The signs had been subtle at first. Marcus came home later, citing difficult deals that needed his attention. New cologne that smelled nothing like the one I'd bought him for Christmas. A sudden interest in spin classes at a gym across town when we had a perfectly good fitness center 3 blocks from our house. But it was the phone call I'd accidentally overheard 6 months ago that had crystallized everything. I'd come home early from a canceled client meeting and heard Marcus in his home office, door ajar, voice low and intimate in a way he hadn't spoken to me in years. "I can't wait to see you either," he'd said. "Just a few more months. Once the Thompson deal closes, everything changes." I stood frozen in the hallway, my briefcase still in my hand. No, she doesn't suspect anything. Catherine's so focused on her work, she barely notices I'm gone. That sentence had cut deeper than the affair itself. Not just the betrayal, but the casual dismissal. The assumption that I was oblivious, too busy, too trusting to see what was happening in my own marriage. I'd walked quietly back out the front door, sat in my car for 10 minutes, and made a decision. I wouldn't confront him. I wouldn't cry or rage or demand explanations. I would plan. I would document. I will prepare. Because Marcus had made one critical miscalculation. He'd assumed that being a financial analyst meant I only understood numbers. What he'd forgotten was that I understood systems, patterns, and how to protect assets. I'd spent my entire career helping wealthy clients structure their finances to weather economic storms. Now I would structure mine to weather a divorce. That evening, I'd returned home at my usual time, kissed Marcus hello, and asked about his day. He'd complained about a difficult client, never mentioning the woman whose voice I'd heard him promising forever to just hours earlier. I'd started my preparation that night. First, I'd opened a private bank account at a different institution, one Marcus had no connection to. Every paycheck, I'd deposited my usual amount into our joint account. But I'd also started redirecting my annual bonuses and stock dividends to the private account. Over 6 months, I'd quietly accumulated $87,000 that existed completely outside Marcus's awareness. Next, I'd make copies. Not just financial documents, though I'd meticulously duplicated every bank statement, investment record, and property deed. I'd also copied Marcus's work files when he'd left his laptop unlocked, including emails and client contracts I suspected contained irregularities. Marcus's real estate firm had been his pride and joy, but I'd noticed discrepancies in the books when he'd asked me to review them the previous year. Properties listed at values that didn't match market rates. Investment partners whose names appeared on some documents, but not others. Transfer dates that seemed strategically timed around tax deadlines. At the time, I'd mentioned the inconsistencies gently, suggesting he have his accountant review them. Marcus had dismissed my concerns with a patronizing smile, reminding me that real estate worked differently than securities. Now those same irregularities looked less like honest mistakes and more like deliberate schemes to hide income or avoid tax obligations. I documented everything, cross-referencing dates and amounts, building a clear picture of financial structures that wouldn't survive serious scrutiny. I'd also consulted with 3 different divorce attorneys, careful to use consultation appointments that wouldn't create a formal attorney-client relationship that Marcus's lawyers could later challenge. Each consultation taught me something different about New York divorce law, asset division, and the importance of establishing a paper trail. The most valuable lesson came from Margaret Chen, a sharply dressed woman in her 60s who'd handled some of the city's most contentious divorces. The spouse who files first controls the narrative, she'd told me, leaning back in her chair. But timing matters. You want to file when you have maximum leverage and when he has maximum vulnerability. What creates vulnerability? I'd asked. A major business transaction closing, a promotion, anything that makes him confident and careless. She'd studied me carefully. You're not emotional about this, which is smart. But you need to decide what you actually want: revenge, justice, protection, because the strategy changes depending on your goal. I'd thought about that question for weeks. What did I want? Not revenge, exactly. I wasn't interested in destroying Marcus for the sake of destruction. But I wanted justice. I wanted him to understand that dismissing me, underestimating me, and assuming I'd remain ignorant had been a critical error in judgment. Most importantly, I wanted protection. For myself, for our children, for the life I'd spent 17 years building. So I'd continued my quiet preparation, even as Marcus had grown bolder with his affair. He'd stopped being careful about his phone, leaving it unlocked on the kitchen counter. He'd stayed out later, sometimes not coming home until after midnight, offering increasingly implausible excuses about client dinners and networking events. I'd said nothing. I'd packed his lunch some mornings. I'd ask about his day every evening. I'd maintained the facade of the devoted wife who trusted her husband completely, because Margaret Chen had been right about timing, and I'd been waiting for Marcus to give me the perfect moment. That moment had come 3 weeks ago, when Marcus announced that the Thompson deal, the massive commercial development project he'd been working on for 18 months, was finally closing. The commission alone would be worth almost $2 million, the largest single payment his firm had ever received. "This changes everything, Catherine," he'd said over dinner, his excitement genuine for the first time in months. "We should celebrate. Maybe take that trip to Italy we've been talking about." We hadn't been talking about Italy. He'd been talking about Italy with Elena, based on the travel research I'd found in his browsing history. "That sounds wonderful," I replied, smiling warmly. "You've worked so hard for this." What Marcus didn't know was that his celebration would be short-lived, because the Thompson deal closing meant that $2 million would hit his business account, significantly increasing our marital assets right before I filed for divorce. And in New York, assets acquired during the marriage were subject to equitable distribution. I'd scheduled my appointment with Margaret Chen for the day after the Thompson deal closed. I'd hired the private investigator 2 weeks before that, knowing I needed current documentation of the affair. And I'd prepared a separate document outlining every financial irregularity I'd discovered in Marcus's business, ready to share with appropriate authorities if necessary. Now, sitting at my desk with the investigator's report in my hands, I knew it was time. I called Margaret Chen's office and confirmed our appointment for tomorrow morning. Then I called my sister Rachel, the only person I'd told about any of this. "It's happening," I said when she answered. "Are you okay?" Rachel's voice was tight with concern. She'd wanted me to confront Marcus months ago, to throw him out, to publicly shame him. She didn't understand that emotional satisfaction wasn't my goal. "I'm fine," I replied. And I was. I felt calm, focused, and ready. "Can you keep the kids this weekend? I'm going to need some space to handle the initial fallout." "Of course. Catherine, are you sure about this? Once you start, there's no going back." "I've been sure for 6 months," I said. "I'm not going back. I'm going forward." That evening, I came home to find Marcus in his study, bourbon in hand, reviewing documents spread across his mahogany desk. The The Thompson deal had officially closed that afternoon. He looked satisfied, accomplished, completely unaware that his world was about to fracture. "How was your day?" I asked from the doorway, keeping my voice neutral. "Incredible," he said, not looking up. "The Thompson commission hit the account this afternoon. Biggest payday of my career." "That's wonderful. I'm proud of you." He finally looked at me then, his expression softening in a way that might have meant something 17 years ago. "Thank you, Catherine. I know I've been distracted lately, but this deal was consuming. Things will be different now." Different. He had no idea how different things were about to become. "I'm sure they will be," I replied. "I'm going to check on the kids' homework." I climbed the stairs to Emma's room, where she sat at her desk working through algebra problems. She looked up when I entered, her expression concerned in that perceptive way teenagers have when they sense something wrong even if they can't articulate it. "Mom, are you okay?" I sat on the edge of her bed. "I'm fine, sweetheart. How's the homework going?" "It's fine." She studied me carefully. "You and Dad seem, different lately." Children always know, I thought. Even when you think you're hiding it perfectly, they sense the shift in atmosphere, the careful politeness that replaces genuine warmth. "Things are complicated right now," I said carefully. "But I want you to know that whatever happens, your dad and I both love you and Lucas very much. That will never change." Emma's eyes widened slightly. "Are you getting divorced?" The directness of the question caught me off guard, but I recovered quickly. "We might be. I don't know yet for certain. But if we do, it won't be your fault or Lucas's fault. Sometimes adults make decisions that don't work out." "Is Dad cheating on you?" My heart cracked at the matter-of-fact way she asked it, as if she'd been waiting for confirmation of something she'd already suspected. "Why would you ask that?" Emma shrugged, looking uncomfortable. "I've heard him on the phone sometimes. He sounds different when he talks to whoever it is, and he's gone a lot." I pulled her into a hug, fighting the anger that rose in my chest. Not anger at Emma's perceptiveness, but at Marcus for being so careless that even our children had noticed. "Whatever happens," I said firmly, "you and Lucas are my priority. I will always protect you. Do you understand?" She nodded against my shoulder. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, sweetheart." The next morning, I dressed carefully in a charcoal suit and pearls, the same outfit I wore for important client presentations. I needed to project confidence, control, competence. Marcus had already left for the office by the time I came downstairs, probably meeting Elena for a celebratory breakfast now that his big deal had closed. I dropped the kids at school, watching them walk through the gates with their backpacks and their easy assumption that the world was stable and predictable. By the end of the week, that assumption would be shattered. I hated that. But staying in a fraudulent marriage would teach them worse lessons about love, respect, and self-worth. Margaret Chen's office was in a sleek building in Midtown, all glass and chrome and expensive art. Her assistant showed me to a conference room where Margaret was already waiting, flanked by a junior associate and a paralegal. "Catherine," Margaret said, standing to shake my hand, "are you ready?" "Completely." "Then let's begin." We spent 3 hours reviewing everything. The investigator's report with its damning photographs, the financial documents showing Marcus's questionable business practices, the bank statements I'd been quietly collecting for 6 months, the property records, investment accounts, retirement funds, everything that comprised our marital assets. Margaret's associate took notes while the paralegal organized documents into color-coded folders. Margaret herself asked sharp, detailed questions, probing for weaknesses in our case, anticipating what Marcus's attorneys might argue. "The affair evidence is solid," Margaret finally said. "New York is a no-fault divorce state, so technically adultery doesn't affect the divorce itself, but it does affect custody considerations and can influence equitable distribution if we can show he spent marital assets on the affair." "He bought her jewelry," I said, sliding across the credit card statements I'd copied. "Expensive jewelry, and he's been paying for her apartment, the one in his building portfolio. It's listed as vacant, but the utilities show regular usage." Margaret smiled. The predatory expression of an attorney who'd just been handed ammunition. That's a misuse of marital assets. We can use that. And the business irregularities? I asked. She reviewed the documents I'd prepared, her expression growing more interested. These are significant. If even half of what you're suggesting is accurate, Marcus could face serious consequences. Tax fraud, misrepresentation to investors, possibly money laundering depending on how deep this goes. I'm not trying to send him to prison, I said carefully. I just want him to understand that I have leverage. You have more than leverage, Margaret replied. You have insurance. If Marcus tries to fight the divorce terms, tries to hide assets or claim poverty, you can share these documents with the appropriate authorities. The threat alone should be enough to make him cooperative. I want primary custody of the children, I said, and I want the house. I'll give him the vacation property in the Hamptons and his business accounts, but I want the family home and enough assets to maintain stability for Emma and Lucas. Margaret nodded approvingly. Given the adultery evidence and the fact that you've been the primary parent while he's been focused on his business and his affair, primary custody is very likely. The house is reasonable. We'll propose a settlement that gives you the security you need while letting him save face in the business community. When do we file? Today, Margaret said. Right now. The longer we wait, the more time he has to move assets or prepare his own strategy. You've done excellent preparation, Catherine. Now we execute. The filing process was surprisingly clinical. Documents signed, fees paid, official paperwork submitted to the court system. By 2 p.m., Marcus Winters was officially being served with divorce papers, and I was officially the petitioning spouse. Margaret had arranged for a process server to deliver the papers to Marcus's office rather than at home, a strategic choice designed to catch him off guard in a professional setting where he'd have to maintain composure. He'll call you, Margaret warned as I prepared to leave her office. He'll be angry, confused, possibly accusatory. Do not engage. Tell him all communication goes through your attorney now. Do not let him manipulate you into a conversation. I nodded, but I wasn't worried about Marcus manipulating me. That time had passed. The call came at 3:17 p.m. I was back at my office reviewing a client portfolio when my phone lit up with Marcus's number. I let it ring through to voicemail. He called again immediately, then again. Finally, a text appeared. What the hell is this? Call me now. I blocked his number and called Margaret instead. He's trying to reach me. Ignore him, she advised. He's panicking. That's good. Panic leads to mistakes. Marcus's next move was predictable. At 5:30 p.m., just as I was preparing to leave the office, he appeared in our reception area, his expression thunderous. My assistant, Michael, stood up nervously as Marcus strode past him toward my door. Catherine, we need to talk, Marcus said, barging into my office without knocking. I remained seated, my posture calm. Hello, Marcus. I'm afraid all communication needs to go through my attorney now. Your attorney? Catherine, what is this insanity? Divorce papers. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. But why? What did I do? If this is about work stress or me being busy with the Thompson deal... It's not about the Thompson deal, I interrupted. It's about Elena. The color drained from his face. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Who told you that? There's nothing... I slid the investigator's report across my desk. 6 months of documentation, photographs, credit card statements, hotel receipts. I know everything, Marcus. I've known for a long time. He stared at the report without touching it, his expression cycling through denial, anger, and finally something that looked almost like fear. Catherine, I can explain. I don't need explanations. I need you to leave my office. We have been together for 17 years. 2 children. You can't just throw that away. I didn't throw it away, I said, my voice even. You did. Every time you meet her, every time you lied about where you were, every time you came home and pretended everything was fine. I made a mistake. I'll end it. We can work this out, go to counseling. I'm not interested in counseling. I'm interested in divorce." Marcus's expression hardened, the shock giving way to anger. "You really want to do this? Fine. But you're not taking everything. That business is mine. The Thompson Commission is mine. I built all of it." "We'll let the court decide what's equitable," I replied. "But I should mention, my attorney will be very interested in discussing certain irregularities in your business practices. Tax reporting discrepancies, properties held in questionable structures, investment partnerships that don't quite align with your official documentation." The fear returned to his face, sharper this time. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that I copied everything, Marcus. Every file, every email, every questionable transaction. I have documentation that would interest several regulatory agencies." "You're threatening me?" "I'm stating facts. How those facts get used depends entirely on how cooperative you are during this divorce." We stared at each other across my desk, 17 years of marriage reduced to this moment of cold negotiation. "I underestimated you," Marcus finally said, his voice bitter. "Yes," I agreed, "you did." He left without another word, and I sat in the sudden silence of my office. My hands finally starting to shake now that the confrontation was over. The next week was a blur of legal maneuvering. Marcus hired Arnold Rothstein, an aggressive divorce attorney known for scorched earth tactics. Rothstein immediately filed motions challenging everything: the filing timeline, the asset claims, even trying to argue that I'd committed fraud by hiding income in my private account. Margaret had anticipated all of it. "Rothstein is predictable," she told me during one of our daily strategy sessions. "He blusters and threatens, but he knows his client is vulnerable. The affair evidence is solid, and the business irregularities create massive liability. He's posturing for better settlement terms. So what do? We hold firm. We've asked for reasonable terms. Primary custody with generous visitation for Marcus. The family home and enough assets to maintain the children's current lifestyle. He keeps his business and the vacation property. It's actually quite fair given what we could demand." But Marcus didn't see it that way. Through Rothstein, he countered with an insulting offer: 50-50 custody, sale of the family home with proceeds split, and a claim that my income should be calculated to include bonuses I hadn't yet received, which would reduce any support obligations. "He's dreaming," Margaret said when we reviewed the counteroffer, "but he's also stalling, which means he's not ready to face reality yet." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. 2 weeks after I filed for divorce, I received a call from someone named Jessica Hartley. She identified herself as Marcus's business partner in the Thompson deal, a detail that surprised me because Marcus had always described the Thompson project as his sole venture. "Mrs. Winters, I need to speak with you about your husband's business practices," Jessica said, her voice tense. "I've discovered some serious irregularities in how he's been handling investor funds." We met the next day at a coffee shop in Tribeca, far from Marcus's usual haunts. Jessica was in her early 40s, dressed in an expensive suit, her expression a mixture of anger and anxiety. Marcus told all the Thompson investors that he was the sole principal on the deal, Jessica explained, showing me documents on her tablet. "But I'm actually a 50% partner. We structured it that way for tax purposes and to diversify liability. The problem is, Marcus has been receiving payments that should have been split between us. The commission from the Thompson closing, he deposited the entire $2 million into his personal business account. I should have received $1 million. I studied the partnership agreement she showed me, my financial analyst training immediately recognizing the implications. This is fraud. Exactly, and it gets worse. I started digging into other deals we've worked on together, and I've found a pattern. Marcus has been systematically misrepresenting ownership structures to investors and partners, keeping a larger share of proceeds than he's entitled to. Why are you telling me this? Jessica met my gaze directly. Because I'm about to file a lawsuit against him, and I thought you should know before it becomes public. Also, because I suspect you might have information that could help my case. I've heard through mutual acquaintances that you're divorcing him and that you've been very thorough in documenting his finances. I considered it carefully. Helping Jessica could strengthen my position in the divorce, but it could also expose me to being drawn into a complex fraud investigation. "Let me speak with my attorney," I finally said, "but I may be able to provide some documentation that would support your claims." Margaret was thrilled when I told her about Jessica's lawsuit. This changes everything. If Marcus is facing fraud allegations from a business partner, he'll be desperate to settle the divorce quickly and quietly. He can't afford to have multiple legal battles exposing his practices. She was right. Within 3 days of Jessica filing her lawsuit, which made the local business news with headlines like "Local Developer Accused of Defrauding Partner," Arnold Rothstein called requesting an emergency settlement conference. The conference took place in Margaret's office, all parties present with their attorneys. Marcus looked haggard, dark circles under his eyes, his usual confident demeanor replaced by barely contained anxiety. "My client is prepared to agree to reasonable terms," Rothstein began, his aggressive posture notably softened. "Given recent business complications, Mr. Winters believes it's in everyone's interest to resolve this matter efficiently." "What terms?" Margaret asked. Rothstein slid a document across the conference table. As I reviewed it, I realized Marcus was conceding almost everything. Primary custody to me, with alternating weekend visitation for him. The family home in my name. 60% of marital assets, including retirement accounts and ongoing child support, well above the state guidelines. "In exchange," Rothstein continued, "Mrs. Winters agrees not to share any business documentation with parties outside this divorce proceeding, and both parties agree to a mutual, non-disparagement clause." "He wants my silence about the business irregularities," I said to Margaret, "which means that information has significant value," Margaret replied. She looked at Rothstein. "We want 70% of marital assets, not 60, and the child support figure needs to be adjusted upward by 15% to account for the children's private school tuition and extracurricular activities." "That's excessive. That's our position," Margaret interrupted. "Mr. Winters is facing fraud allegations from his business partner. He's potentially facing investigations from tax authorities and the SEC. My client's documentation could make those investigations significantly more complicated or, alternatively, could remain private. The choice is his." Marcus and Rothstein conferred in whispers for several minutes. I watched Marcus's face, seeing the man I'd been married to for 17 years, calculating, weighing options, realizing that his careful control had slipped away. Finally, Marcus nodded. "Fine, 70% and the higher child support. But I want the settlement finalized immediately, and I want absolute confidentiality." "Agreed," Margaret said. We signed the settlement agreement that afternoon. Just like that, my 17-year marriage ended not with drama or tears, but with signatures on legal documents and a handshake between attorneys. As Marcus prepared to leave the conference room, he stopped beside my chair. "Was any of it real?" he asked quietly. "All those years. Did you ever actually love me?" I looked up at him. This man who had shared my bed and my life, who had fathered my children, who had betrayed me while assuming I'd never notice or never care. "Yes," I answered honestly. "I loved you very much, but you stopped being that person long before I stopped loving him." He nodded slowly, something that might have been regret crossing his features. Then he left, and I sat in the conference room feeling not triumphant but simply tired. "You did well," Margaret said after the others had gone. "Most people let emotion drive these proceedings. You stayed strategic." "I had good motivation," I replied. 2 children who needed stability and a future that wasn't defined by someone else's choices. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. Marcus settled Jessica's lawsuit out of court for an undisclosed sum, but the scandal had damaged his reputation in the commercial real estate community. several partners quietly distanced themselves from his firm. The Thompson deal ended up being his last major project. Elena, predictably, left him once the money troubles started. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd moved on to another successful businessman, someone with fewer complications and a better financial outlook. Marcus and I established a civil co-parenting relationship, focused entirely on Emma and Lucas. He took them every other weekend and one evening during the week. The children adjusted better than I'd feared, perhaps because the end of our marriage meant the end of the tense silences and false pretenses that had characterized our final year together. I sold some of the assets from the divorce settlement and used the proceeds to start my own financial consulting firm, specializing in helping women protect their assets during major life transitions. The business grew quickly, fueled by word of mouth and my reputation for thorough, strategic planning. 1 year after filing for divorce, I stood in the living room of the house that was now solely mine, watching Emma and Lucas do homework at the kitchen table. The house felt different without Marcus, lighter somehow, as if the weight of maintaining an illusion had been physically lifted. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Dinner this weekend? Want to celebrate your 1-year freedom anniversary?" I smiled, typing back, "Absolutely." Emma looked up from her algebra homework. "Mom, are you happy?" The question was so direct, so earnest, that I walked over and hugged her. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm happy. Are you?" She considered the question seriously. "Yeah, I mean, it's different, but it's not too bad different. It's just calmer, I guess." "I understand exactly what you mean." Lucas glanced up from his science textbook. "Dad seems sad sometimes." "That's okay," I said gently. "People make choices, and sometimes those choices have sad consequences. But that doesn't mean the choices weren't necessary." Later that evening, after the children were asleep, I sat in my home office reviewing client files. The divorce documents were filed away in a cabinet, no longer something I needed to reference daily. Margaret Chen had called earlier to let me know that the regulatory investigations into Marcus's business practices had quietly concluded with financial penalties but no criminal charges, largely because the primary complainant, Jessica Hartley, had accepted a settlement that included her agreement not to pursue the matter further. "Marcus got lucky," Margaret had said, "but he knows how close he came to much worse consequences. I suspect he'll be much more careful going forward." I suspected she was right. Marcus had always been intelligent, even if his judgment had been catastrophically flawed. He'd learned an expensive lesson about underestimating the people around him and about the consequences of treating others as if they were oblivious or irrelevant. As for me, I'd learned something too. I'd learned that patience and preparation were more powerful than anger or confrontation. That documentation mattered. That staying strategic when you wanted to be emotional was the difference between being a victim and being empowered. I'd also learned that revenge, if that's what you wanted to call it, wasn't about destruction. It was about justice, about ensuring that actions had appropriate consequences, about protecting yourself and the people you loved from further harm. Marcus had assumed that betraying me would be easy, that I would either never discover his affair or would be too emotionally devastated to respond effectively. He'd miscalculated badly. The calm, methodical preparation I'd undertaken wasn't cold or calculating. It was self-preservation. It was love for my children. It was respect for myself and for the life I'd built. And ultimately, that was the trap I'd set. Not a cruel or vindictive trap, but simply the consequences of his own actions, documented and presented in a way that made them impossible to deny or minimize. Marcus had trapped himself. I just made sure he couldn't escape the consequences. 2 years after the divorce, I was invited to speak at a women's financial empowerment conference. The organizers wanted me to discuss asset protection during divorce, and I'd agreed, thinking it might help other women facing similar situations. The auditorium was filled with women of all ages, all backgrounds, all facing their own challenges with relationships, finances, and uncertain futures. As I stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, I thought about where I'd been 2 years ago, sitting in my office, opening that envelope from the private investigator, making the decision to act rather than react. The most important thing I can tell you, I began, is that knowledge is power, not power in a destructive sense, but power in the sense of control over your own life. When you know where you stand financially, when you understand your rights and your options, when you prepare carefully and document thoroughly, you protect yourself and your family. I talked about the importance of separate accounts, of understanding marital assets, of recognizing red flags early. I talked about the difference between reactive decisions made in emotional turmoil and strategic decisions made from a place of calm preparation. Some people might call what I did calculating, I said. They might think I should have confronted my husband immediately, that I should have made decisions based on emotion rather than strategy. But I had children to protect. I had a future to secure. And I knew that emotional satisfaction in the moment wouldn't provide long-term stability. After the presentation, dozens of women approached me with questions, sharing their own stories of financial uncertainty, of partners who controlled all the assets, of feeling trapped and powerless. One woman, probably in her early 30s, asked quietly, "How did you stay so calm? Weren't you angry?" I was furious, I admitted. But I channeled that anger into preparation. Every time I wanted to confront him, I told myself, "Not yet. Document this first. Secure this account first. Consult with one more attorney first." The anger motivated me, but it didn't control me. Another woman, older, with gray streaks in her hair and tired eyes, said, "I've been married 42 years. I don't know if I have the strength to start over." I took her hand gently. "You have more strength than you realize. The fact that you're here, listening, learning, that's already starting. You don't have to make any decisions today. Just start understanding your position. Knowledge first, decisions later." As the conference ended and I packed up my materials, I felt something I hadn't expected: gratitude. Not gratitude for Marcus's betrayal, but gratitude for what I'd learned about myself through the process of responding to it. I discovered reserves of patience, strategic thinking, and resilience I hadn't known I possessed. The trap I'd set for Marcus hadn't just protected my assets or secured my children's future. It had revealed my own capabilities to me. That evening, I had dinner with Emma and Lucas at our favorite Italian restaurant. They were older now, Emma 17 and about to start her senior year of high school, Lucas 15 and growing so fast his clothes seemed to fit him for only a few weeks at a time. "Mom," Emma said over pasta, "I've been thinking about what I want to study in college." "What's that?" "Finance, like you. I want to help women protect themselves financially." I felt tears prick at my eyes, surprising myself. "That's wonderful." "Sweetheart, you taught me that being smart about money isn't cold or calculating. It's caring about your future enough to protect it." Lucas rolled his eyes in typical teenage fashion. "Great, now we're going to have two of you lecturing me about saving my allowance." We all laughed, and in that moment I knew I'd made the right decisions. Not easy decisions, not emotionally satisfying decisions in the immediate sense, but right decisions. Marcus still saw the children regularly, and we maintained a cordial relationship focused entirely on co-parenting. He'd rebuilt his business somewhat, though on a smaller scale and with much more transparent practices. I'd heard he was dating again, someone age-appropriate this time, another real estate professional who seemed to understand and accept his past mistakes. I wished him well, genuinely. Not because I forgave the betrayal or because I thought we should have stayed married, but because my own happiness no longer depended on his misery. That realization had been freeing in itself. My consulting firm continued to grow, and I'd brought on 2 associates to handle the expanding client base. We specialized in what I called protective financial planning, helping people, primarily women, structure their assets in ways that provided security regardless of what happened in their personal relationships. It's not about planning for divorce, I'd tell clients. It's about planning for independence. Whether you stay married forever or find yourself unexpectedly single, you should always know where you stand financially and have resources that belong solely to you. 5 years after my divorce, on a cool autumn evening, I stood in the gallery at Emma's college graduation from Columbia, where she'd majored in economics with a concentration in financial planning. She walked across the stage to receive her diploma, and I thought about the woman I'd been when she was 12 years old, trapped in a failing marriage, afraid of the future, uncertain of my own strength. That woman had found her strength. She'd planned carefully, acted strategically, and protected what mattered most. And in doing so, she'd taught her daughter that empowerment came not from bitterness or revenge, but from knowledge, preparation, and the courage to take action when action was needed. After the ceremony, as we celebrated at dinner with Rachel and other family members, Emma raised her glass in a toast. "To Mom," she said, "who taught me that the best trap you can set is simply letting people face the consequences of their own actions. And to document everything," I added with a smile. We all laughed, and as I looked around the table at the life I'd built, the family I'd protected, the future I'd secured, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: complete peace. Marcus had thought he could betray me without consequences, that I would remain oblivious or too weak to respond. He'd underestimated my intelligence, my resourcefulness, and my determination to protect my children and myself. The trap he'd walked into wasn't one I'd maliciously constructed. It was simply the truth, carefully documented and strategically revealed. Sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate schemes or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it's just making sure that actions have appropriate consequences, that lies are exposed, and that the person who's been dismissed and underestimated shows exactly what they're capable of when pushed. I'd shown Marcus what I was capable of. More importantly, I'd shown myself. And that, more than any settlement or any moment of vindication, was the real victory. If you've ever felt dismissed, underestimated, or betrayed, I hope my story shows you that you have more power than you might realize. Not power to destroy, but power to protect, power to prepare, power to ensure that your future isn't defined by someone else's poor choices. Document everything. Know your worth. Understand your rights. And when the time comes to act, do so strategically, calmly, and with absolute clarity about what you're protecting. Because the best trap isn't the one you set for someone else. It's the one they set for themselves when they underestimate you.